Craig Gilbert is the Washington bureau chief for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He has a very informed knowledge of politicians, how they act, why they do the things they do. Craig, if you could just introduce yourself and start by just kind of giving us a little background.
I've been in the Washington bureau of the Milwaukee paper for 9 years. I was covering politics, Wisconsin politics before that. And I've worked for the paper since the 80s. We have a small bureau, we have 2 people, but because we're an independent paper, which is a rarity in Washington these days, we have a lot of freedom to cover a lot of different things. And a lot of what I do is politics. A fair amount is covering Congress. Spent a lot of time covering presidential campaigns. I get a lot of different reactions when I tell people what I do, and one of them is, what a great job, it sounds like a lot of fun. The other one is, how can you stand it? How can you stand talking to those people? And I think a certain amount of cynicism is pretty healthy and appropriate, but I think it's not so healthy to sort of take the attitude, both as a citizen and also as a reporter, that they're all crooks and they're all bums and none of it matters. One thing I try to do as a reporter, and I think it's also helpful to do as a citizen, is to take what politicians say at face value and kind of begin with the premise that what they say reflects what they believe, as opposed to getting too hung up on people's motivations and ulterior motives.
But I have absolutely no faith in American media whatsoever. I listen to public radio and watch public television, but for the most part I steer away from it because I feel that media, reporters, what have you, you don't want to step on the politicians' feet, so you ask them questions that aren't going to get their feet hot, not going to put their feet in the fire. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's important to keep these folks honest. It's important to keep the pressure on them, and again, they're not. It's not a totally unresponsive system. I mean, people in politics respond to the feedback they get. People in the media respond to the feedback they get. I think people sometimes make the mistake of assuming that that's not true, that there's nothing they can say or do that will get their attention or that will move people. But the fact is, politicians in their own way, because they have an instinct for self-preservation, are responsive to stimuli. They're not immovable. And I'd also make the point that the same thing is true of the media, because I know there's a fair amount of cynicism about the media too. And the media is also responsive, I think, to feedback and criticism. And
just on the basis of some of the work that I've been involved in, a lot of it, we often, when we go to think about having a reporter there or thinking about getting the story into print or anything, we know right away that it's a fluff story. The negative thing's going to sell, or the story that, it's got to be a shocker. It can't be something, that's just positive. I'm not sure if you guys had reporters at your event that you had with all the kids there and everything. I would see that as something significant. We had the same thing at UWM, where we engaged over 200 fourth graders and tried to get them excited about the college process. And the media was like, "Oh, that's cute. Okay."
Yeah, but and it takes some work to sell that kind of story. Maybe try to put yourself in the shoes of a newspaper reporter and say, what would be an interesting story? It's not like it has to be one thing. It doesn't have to be conflict. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be, bizarre. But it has to be something.
A lot of people could argue that our culture today is kind of influenced by media, and it's almost like an MTV age culture of how people dress and how people think. Internationally, we're kind of looked at as ignorant Americans, and I think that directly relates to the culture that we're exposed to as Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. That's what we see. Don't make the mistake of extrapolating, because you're seeing all this garbage on cable TV, that this is all the information the American people are getting, and it's the complete obsession of the media.
It's
because
like a rolling background, though. Everywhere in American life, except for wing spread, you see a McDonald's, a Taco Bell, a Walgreens, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Walgreens, McDonald's, Taco Bell, It's like a rolling background, and you flip through the channels, it's like Michael Jackson.
You're making sweeping statements about the media, which are not only generalizations, but presume that the media is a single entity. and it's not.
There's a difference between being an independent newspaper, and then there's a difference between being publicly funded, which is NPR, but this corporate conglomerate owned by everything. Clear Channel is owned, laterally. They own just about everything.
There's sort of two different things that have gone on in recent years in the media that are kind of trends in different opposite directions, and one is what you're alluding to, which is this consolidation. But at the same time that's happening, in a lot of ways you have this kind of more democratizing influence with the internet and with the profusion of different kinds of media outlets that didn't exist before. I mean, talk radio is part of that process. The internet is part of that process. It introduces competition and a variety of sources of information that didn't exist before.
We keep telling ourselves that there's other media outlets, and I just wonder how many people actually actively seek out media outlets.
It's out there somewhere. I would know how to get to it. And I think the people that we want to reach that really need to know all these different issues are the ones that don't know that they can look into other things. What I think we're trying to say is that we would like to see these more important things in mass media.
Why wasn't there a report about the conflict in Nigeria 2 weeks ago that made gas prices go up to $2.75 a gallon? Everybody knows when, like, famous people, how many kids they have. Why isn't it that more reported? I mean, that's more like affecting our lives. Why isn't that like the dominant thing that's being shown?
Well, I mean,
like that's you're a reporter. Like, this is part of your duty to make us know things like this that we don't know anything about.
Reporters want to do substantive stories. Well, today, you don't have a captive audience in television, and people are free if they don't like what or are not interested in what you're reporting to tune in to another network or another channel or hundreds of channels, and so these are. I mean, there is a level of economic competition in the business, and there's plenty. I don't have any problem with criticism of the media because there's plenty to be criticized. We have a responsibility and a role to play. People also have a responsibility to seek out the information that is available, and it's out there.
An educated person would know they're not going to go to Whack Arnold's and get a double cheeseburger every day. But you drive around up and down the street and you're like, damn, there's no place to eat. Everything's greasy and fried. It's like that with media too. You have to search it out. You have to look for the good food.
I actually think the media is a tool that you can manipulate to do whatever you want in society. And I personally would not be against it, but I'll be for it. Anything in life is, to me in life, there's always good and bad in everything you do in life. You have to just find the good and turn it to empower you to keep going with whatever there is.
I mean, it's hard to let go of the anger, I guess, because you get so frustrated with general things that are happening or ignorant people that don't seek out additional information. But you have to realize that you have to be part of the solution rather than a person who works against those things. Without positively utilizing the media, positively utilizing politics, there's no way that we can do the social good that we want to do.
They said I talk about men too much. I do. I love men.
I want to see T.W. Hansen in the credits on television. That's what I want out of this documentary.
There's no way people would be coming over my house for dinner. Not happen.
It's like the peas stink, I mean, nobody wants to eat the peas.
I keep inviting them, come to the office again.